The Roger Stone Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome to the Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Audio Networks. On February 3rd, 2023, at around 8:55 in the evening, a Norfolk and Southern freight train carrying hazardous materials derailed in East Palestine, Ohio. The derailment involved 53 of the train's 141 cars, with 20 of those cars carrying hazardous substances like vinyl chloride, ethylene glycol, and butyl oxalates. The incident caused massive fire and increased toxic chemicals into the air, soil, and water, forcing the evacuation of over 2,000 residents within just a 1-mile radius. Emergency responders conducted a controlled burn of vinyl chloride to prevent an explosion, releasing an enormous plume of black smoke containing hydrogen chloride and phosgene into the air. This, in turn, raised significant health and environmental concerns. Residents to this day are reporting symptoms like rashes, respiratory issues, nausea, and, of course, thousands of fish and dogs and cats died due to the contamination. Long-term health risks, including cancer, remain a very significant concern due to the exposure to chemicals like vinyl chloride, a known carcinogen. Now, the disaster, of course, led to lawsuits, a $600 million settlement by Norfolk and Southern, and ongoing investigations by the National Transportation Safety Board, which cited an overheated wheel bearing as the likely cause, exacerbated, they said, by inadequate safety protocols. To this day, environmental cleanup continues with over 175,000 tons of contaminated soil removed by the middle of 2024, although it is now interesting that a number of those families affected have filed a new lawsuit against BlackRock, Vanguard, Mercy Health, and Quest Diagnostics, as well as the CDC, accusing them of instructing healthcare providers not to test for dioxins or other hazardous substances. The suit alleges a coordinated effort to block medical care for those exposed to these toxic chemicals. Now, you'll recall that President Joe Biden did not visit East Palestine, Ohio. Presidential candidate Donald Trump did. The plaintiffs claimed that there was a widespread conspiratorial misdiagnosis, delayed treatment, and that a letter was circulated from the administration telling providers to dismiss patients' health concerns. Every American should be concerned about this, but I am particularly concerned because my one and only great-grandson lives just 12 miles from East Palestine, Ohio. He continues to suffer from rashes, diarrhea, fever, a hacking cough, continued upper respiratory infections, and we assume migraines because he's only 3 years old. I'm delighted to see this lawsuit. I'm going to determine whether my daughter and her son can join the lawsuit. It is time for justice for the people of East Palestine. In the meantime, Ross Ulbricht, the man who invented the dark web, who President Donald Trump pledged to pardon after he was convicted and sentenced to 2 life terms on January 21st, spoke this week at a Bitcoin conference. Let's listen to Ross Ulbricht.
You are part of something much bigger. This is bigger than Bitcoin. This is bigger than crypto. Freeing me took many, many people from all walks of life coming together and saying, this is not right. It took many people just like you saying, we care about freedom. And keeping somebody like Ross in a cage until he dies is a threat to freedom itself. It took President Trump recognizing that an injustice had been done and that so many of you demanded that I be freed. I am so thankful that we elected him and that he is who he is. Yep. He's a man who does what he says he'll do. He said he would free me, and he did. Period. He's a man of integrity.
Ross Ulbricht, of course, invented the dark web and then was subsequently charged with federal prosecutors because someone other than Ross Ulbricht sold either drugs or arms illegally on the dark web. This would be like indicting Alexander Graham Bell for inventing the telephone because 30 years later, 50 years later, somebody did a drug deal on the phone. By the way, those who did sell drugs or weapons on the dark web were never prosecuted. But Ross Ulbricht, you see, set up an alternative means of mass communications, which is why he had to pledged to pardon him on day one when he spoke to the National Libertarian Conference, and he was pardoned, Ross Ulbricht, on January 21st, the day after Trump was sworn in. I'm proud to have advocated for that pardon. In the meantime, a man in South Dakota, Daniel Smith, has decided that it's time to put Donald Trump up on Mount Rushmore. He has started a movement. It's called the One More for Rushmore campaign. You can find it at One More for Rushmore if you want to sign the petition. No, they're not raising money. There is no cost. Few presidents, says Mr. Smith, have commanded the nation with the strength, vision, and results of President Donald Trump. As he did in his first term, President Trump is literally fighting to make America great again. Mount Rushmore stands as a tribute to the presidents who defined their eras and earned the lasting honor of the American people. President Trump is one of those presidents. So it is time to add President Donald Trump's face to those other great presidents on Mount Rushmore. Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna, who joined us last week on the show, has already introduced legislation to the Congress that would add President Trump to the Mount Rushmore National Memorial. Now, this is a key point. Those critics who claim that adding the image of President Trump could endanger the faces of the other great American presidents on Mount Rushmore are completely wrong. In fact, design and construction technology is now so advanced that the president's image can be added to the historic monument without any danger to the existing structure. If you want to join, go to onemoreforrushmore.com. Once again, you can add your name to a petition. No, they are not raising money. I have added my name. I urge you to do the same. Coming up in the Roger Stone Show today, Barry Habib, the economic guru, joins us to talk about why it's so important for Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell to cut interest rates. After all, the inflation rate is exactly where it was the last time the Fed cut rates. So why aren't they cutting rates today? Unless, of course, it is to hamper the economic boom that President Donald Trump is laying the groundwork for. So we'll be back on the Roger Stone Show with Barry Habib. Whatever you do, don't touch that dial. We've got a lot more coming up for you on today's show.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. This National Foster Care Month, Marine Toys for Tots is providing hope to children who need it most. Staff Sergeant James Caldwell, who grew up in foster care himself, shares that while handing out gifts at a Toys for Tots distribution event, a little girl looked up at him, reached into her bag, pulled out a stuffed animal and said, "Someone needs to make sure you get a toy too." That simple gesture embodies the heart of Marine Toys for Tots, ensuring every child, including those in foster care, experiences the kindness that can transform their future. Visit toysfortots.org today. The Roger Stone Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
President Donald Trump announced this past week that he would pardon former Connecticut Governor John Rowland, who served 2 separate prison sentences for completely politically motivated non-crimes. You see, Governor Rowland was targeted because he was a successful Republican executive in a deep blue state. He won 3 terms as governor of Connecticut, had the state on a trajectory to becoming red while serving as governor from 1995 to 2004. After a lengthy and financially draining lawfare battle, Governor Rowland was forced to plead guilty to a charge of depriving the public of honest services, a procedural crime of no real merit. But the deep state, the Democrats, thought that they had their scalp. Rowland did his time, paid his debt to society, despite the unfairness of his trial and conviction, and had reinvented himself as a very popular conservative talk show host, gaining an even bigger following to hold the Democrats in Connecticut, who have run the state into the ground, accountable. Governor Rowland was so effective as a grassroots organizer and on the verge of a political comeback that the system decided to strike back and take Governor Rowland out of commission once more. That's when ambitious federal prosecutors went on a fishing expedition using threats and harassment to engineer yet another case against Governor John Rowland. They built their case against Governor Rowland. In doing so, they violated the Brady Act by withholding key evidence from the defense during his trial. And as a result, Governor Rowland was convicted once again of charges related to unlawfully providing campaign services. He was sentenced to prison time and robbed of his influential radio show and, of course, derailing his political comeback. The prosecutors in the second railroading of Governor Rowland would all go on to run for office as Democrats, bragging about how they threw their political opposition behind bars on the campaign trail. Governor Rowland, during the entire time that he was in prison, worked closely with the Prison Fellowship to help reach wayward souls and bring them closer to Jesus Christ. Even in his career, and with his voice taken from him, he remained a devout Christian, a devout Catholic, and what he endured would have caused lesser men to break. But Governor John Rowland remained steadfast in his faith, and it speaks to his character and his integrity. I commend President Donald Trump for this act of mercy and justice in the pardoning of Governor John Rowland of Connecticut. Meanwhile, we lost a giant this week when Bernard Kerik, who served as New York's 40th police commissioner from 2000-2001, passed away at the age of 69. Most people remember Bernard Kerik for his leadership during the 9/11 attacks. He led the police rescue, overseeing rescue and recovering operations at Ground Zero, which earned him widespread recognition as a fearless leader who helped guide New York City through one of its darkest moments. His actions, along with Mayor Rudy Giuliani, were pivotal in stabilizing the city in that post-attack period. He's also credited correctly with reforming the Department of Corrections. Before becoming police commissioner, Bernard Kerik was the commissioner of the Department of Corrections from 1998 to 2000. He is accurately credited with transforming one of the nation's most dangerous and dilapidated correctional systems, including Rikers Island, into a safer and more efficient operation. His leadership reduced violence and improved management of the jail system, which houses 18,000 inmates. And then, of course, there is his decorated service as a New York police officer. Over his nearly 2-year decade with NYPD, Kerik earned over 100 decorations, including 30 medals for excellent, meritorious, and heroic service. Notably, he received the NYPD Medal for Valor for his bravery, which included rescuing victims from burning buildings and surviving an assassination attempt. He was also awarded the CBE by Queen Elizabeth II for his service. Then, of course, there was Bernie Kerik's fundraising for 9/11 families. He helped raise over $216 million to support families affected by the 9/11 attacks, which demonstrates his commitment to the community. And then afterwards, to make very clear, Bernie Kerik became an advocate for criminal justice reform later in his career. After his own brush with the law, he became an advocate for criminal reform justice, drawing on his own experience both as a law enforcement leader and after facing the legal challenges of his own. His work in this area aided the fix a systemic problem with our criminal justice system. To me, Bernard Kerik was a friend and counselor. He and I became close during my own trial by fire, in which the Mueller witch hunt sought to pressure me into testifying falsely against President Donald Trump. And when I refused to do so, they invented non-existent crimes. Even in their final unredacted report by Special Counsel Robert Mueller, which they hid from the American people for years, Mueller was forced to admit that he found no evidence of Russian collusion, WikiLeaks collaboration, or any other crime on my part. It was Bernard Kerik who gave me solace, who bucked me up in those difficult days, who argued forcefully with President Trump for my pardon, and for that I will be eternally grateful, as will all the members of my family. Bernard Kerik, a great man, has passed. We are waiting for funeral details, but I'm told that there will be a funeral for Bernard Kerik, the former police commissioner, with full honors at St. Patrick's Cathedral this week. We await news of those proceedings, but I was touched with how many people online from all walks of life, big shots and just regular people, paying homage to Bernard Kerik, this great man. He called me about 2 weeks ago. You couldn't even tell he was ill, although I knew from mutual friends that he was. And he was excited about the success of President Donald Trump. Don't go away. You're tuned in to The Roger Stone Show. Alex Jones is going to join us, talk about the fight against the New World Order.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Roger Stone Show.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And we're back in the Roger Stone Show. Joining me now is Barry Habib. He is the Chief Executive Officer of MBS Highways. He is nationally recognized as probably the authority on the mortgage and housing market, but he's also a very keen economic analyst in his own right. He is the author of the Amazon best-selling book, Money in the Streets. Barry Habib is actually widely credited with saving the mortgage industry in 2020 from margin calls due to Federal Reserve actions. It was Barry's presentation to the Fed that created stability at a critical time, and we're pleased to have him. Barry, roughly a week ago, President Donald Trump posted this up on social media. He said, "I'm giving serious consideration to bringing Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, the two country's two leading housing agencies, public. I'll be speaking with Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, Secretary of Commerce Howard Lutnick, and the Director of the Federal Housing Finance Agency, William Pulte, among others, and will be making a decision in the very near future. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are doing very well, throwing off a lot of cash, and the time would seem to be right. Stay tuned." Now, you contacted immediately and told me, Barry, this is a great idea, but only if the president continues to guarantee the mortgages. Otherwise, it could have a deleterious effect on housing bond yields. Within minutes of your telling me that, the president then posted, "Our great mortgage agencies, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, provide a vital service to our nation by helping hardworking Americans reach the American dream, home ownership. I'm working on taking these amazing companies public, but I want to be clear, the U.S. government will keep its implicit guarantees, and I will stay strong in my position on oversight, seeing that as president. These agencies are now doing very well and will help to make us make America great again." Barry, your thoughts about why we should take Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac public, as the president seems to be indicating he plans to do.
Well, first of all, Roger, it is so great to be with you here. And, the shareholders of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac would be very pleased to that, because since they've been in conservatorship, they've been kind of, locked out of things. So it would definitely be beneficial to the shareholders. But more importantly, I think that by taking Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac out of conservatorship and allowing them to participate in the free markets, that could be something that actually expands their role into the housing market and helps people to purchase homes and makes homes even more affordable. The other thing is that there is an option that Director Pulte talked about where they would still remain in conservatorship but go public. So that was an interesting one. I gave that a lot of thought, and I think that that could be something where it could be beneficial to the U.S., where the U.S., instead of getting the benefit of just the cash that's thrown off, which, as you correctly mentioned, is very significant, they kind of can pull the money out in buckets by taking the company public. They would then be able to sell off portions of it and have those portions that are sold off generate significant buckets of cash that could go towards things like reducing the debt and reducing the deficit, which then would actually help to bring interest rates down. Roger, one thing that people have to understand, and I know we're going to talk about some other things, and it's all tied together, is one thing that keeps interest rates higher is the amount of debt that the U.S. has. Figure it just round numbers. We've got $7 trillion we spend. We bring in $5 trillion. So that's $2 trillion that we have that is a deficit. It's kind of like a family living above its means. The way the United States makes up that difference is we borrow it. And the way we borrow it is by selling treasuries. We do sell it to people here in the U.S. We sell it to corporations, insurance policies, and other countries as well. So that amount of selling of treasuries, the more that we have to sell, we have to entice people to buy those. And the way you entice them is with a higher rate. So if we had less to sell, we could actually reduce rates.
Yeah, let's listen to Bill Pulte talking about what he and the president and Secretary of Bessent may have planned.
This Biden inflation that we had the last 4 years, which created this housing crisis, now President Trump is coming in and fixing it, and he's turning around Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Bill, I don't know if you know this, and most Americans don't know this, but there's $7.8 trillion in Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac that we, as the American taxpayers, have many rights to. $7.8 trillion. And until President Trump showed up on the scene, nobody even really knew that they were making this much money and that we had these as huge assets. So like one of my friends said recently, President Trump just finds money everywhere. And he found money at Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and we're going to use it for the benefit of the American people.
Okay, so Bill, I heard that same comment on another network from you yesterday. You said this is a business that could be worth trillions of dollars. Trillions to whom?
Trillions to the American people, trillions to the shareholders one day. I mean, we got to clean up the capital structure, and that's potentially what the president is looking at. He will still be in control. It will still be a very, very prominent company for the government. However, we are really focused on driving operational improvements and really making these great American icons once again. And Bill, the American economy is very robust. And under President Trump's leadership, these two companies, I stand behind it, they're going to make over $30 billion a year in earnings. I think that number will eventually be over $50 billion. These are huge assets, Bill, and it's about time we have a president who actually knows that they are there.
Really big.
I think that sums up the possibilities, the great potential. But as you yourself have pointed out on this show, Barry, the key right now is a cut in interest rates by the Federal Reserve. And while Chairman Powell seems to imply that it's Donald Trump who's acting politically by calling for a rate cut, it seems to me that the inflation rate was virtually identical to what it is today the last time the Fed cut rates to try to benefit Joe Biden's reelection. So why not a rate cut now? Again, let's listen to Bill Pulte a second.
From where you sit, what is the most convincing argument for the Fed to cut rates at a time when the White House's tariffs threaten to reignite inflation?
Well, first and foremost, inflation's lower than it was the last time they cut. President Trump has been very successful at reducing inflation, and so therefore it just only makes sense that if inflation was higher and they did cuts then, why can't they do cuts now? But to your point, for the last 4 years, at least as it pertains to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, inflation has been totally out of control. Mortgage rates skyrocketed. And frankly, people are trapped in their homes with these low interest rates. We need to get interest rates down. And President Trump, I believe, deserves that because he's crushed this Biden inflation.
So, Barry, the President, the Secretary of Treasury, the head of the Federal Housing Finance Agency have all called on Jerome Powell to cut rates. Tell us why the Fed should cut rates now.
Well, there's a lot to talk about, Roger. So let's try and unpack this step by step. And if it's okay with you, I just want to try and lay it out so all of the listeners can just try and understand where we are.
Barry, I'm going to lay back and let you talk, and then we'll go to break. When we come back, I'm going to let you talk some more.
Okay. The Fed can either be in one of three positions. One is called accommodative. That means what they're trying to do is keep interest rates low enough to spur borrowing, spur the economy, grow the economy. But the downside is that potentially could cause some inflation. Then there's neutral. That's like Goldilocks. They feel like things are just about right, so we're neutral. We're just going to hang right here. And the goal is to try and be at neutral. And then there is restrictive. Restrictive means that they literally are trying to slow the growth of the economy. And that can be detrimental because that's less tax receipts, that's less growth, that's less money that people are making. But the reason that they want to do this is because they're very concerned about inflation, and it's a very blunt instrument, but that's the tool that they use to tame inflation. Now, if inflation were a major issue, then certainly we'd have to be restrictive. But where we are right now is that the Federal Reserve is 1%, or you could say 100 basis points, that's what most economists would say, restrictive. So that means they are kind of like having their foot on the neck of the economy, intentionally trying to slow it down because they're fearful of inflation. Now, while we don't want inflation, we have to understand what's on the Fed's mind. Number one, the latest inflation rate that came out on a year-over-year basis is 2.5% by the Fed's favorite measure. That's slightly above their target of what they wanted, 2%. But there's a couple of things that we have to understand. That's a year-over-year number, Roger. If we look at the numbers that are coming in, for example, this last month, inflation was a meager 0.1%. If you take it out 2 decimal places, it's 0.12. That's less than 1.5% on an annualized basis. But when we analyze it further, here's what we come up with, and this is what's very interesting.
Barry, I'm going to ask you to hold that thought. We're going to take a quick commercial break, and we'll be back with economic guru Barry Habib explaining why it is essential that Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell, who's not an economist but a lawyer, move to a interest rate cut now. Don't touch that dial. We'll be right back.
Now, it's time for Protecting Your Future, sponsored by Colonial Metals Group.
Here's Roger Stone.
In these turbulent economic times, with the Federal Reserve refusing to cut interest rates and printing money like there's no tomorrow, with Congress refusing to codify the cuts in waste, fraud, and corruption identified by Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency, now is the time to protect your retirement. Now is the time to protect your future, and to do so with the strength of gold. Now is the time to acquire precious metals like gold and silver. You can convert all or part of your IRA, your 401k, or your cash savings tax-free by acquiring gold. The people I trust are the folks at the Colonial Metals Group. And you can reach them at colonialmetalsgroup.com/stone. colonialmetalsgroup.com/stone. Or if you have more questions, go to freegoldguide.com. Believe me, you'll be glad you did.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Roger Stone Show.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And we're back. We're talking to Barry Habib. He is the Chief Executive Officer of MBS Highway, but more importantly, he's probably the country's leading expert on the mortgage and housing markets, and as I say, an astute economic analyst in his own right. Barry, you were telling us about why you think it is essential that the Fed cut rates. Here's what you wrote. Jerome Powell says he doesn't have enough data. He always says that he's data dependent, but the data he's looking at is old and has significant lags. This is analogous to driving a car down the highway but looking in the rearview mirror. It's dangerous, and it's why we have these boom and bust cycles. Your words. Barry, pick it up from there.
So, yeah, we do. And speaking of the lags, the largest components in the Fed's inflation reports that they look at, 44% of the CPI report, the core CPI, and 19% of the core PC, these are the two things the Fed looks at, is shelter. The problem with shelter is that we are ill-equipped to look at these numbers as a government. We're using antiquated methodologies. It is such a big job, and it is, that the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the BLS, they divide the country into 6 pieces because they can't do it in one shot, which means they look at it every 6 months. That in and of itself causes a lag. But then they ask people, hey, what do you pay in rent? That's how shelter's measured, by rents and owner's equivalent rent. And it might reflect a rent that was dependent on a lease that they signed 6 months, 8 months, 10 months earlier. So the numbers that the Fed's looking at are a year old in many cases for the largest component. This is why the Fed was so complicit in creating 9.1% inflation, Roger, because we all knew that inflation was happening. We all knew with all the money that was put out by Biden, with all the programs that were out there, we all knew the economy was ripping, and yet they kept interest rates at zero and kept pumping money into quantitative easing, and that fueled the flames of inflation to 9.1%. Think about how much money that cost us in things like cost of living adjustments, how much people are struggling and paying at the grocery store, how much you pay more for your mortgage or more for your car loans or credit cards. This is all at the hands of Jerome Powell, who you perfectly said is not a trained economist, but an attorney. Now, given all of these things, it is important that he understand, but I don't know if he has the capability to do so, that we are now in the opposite situation. We are looking at data that's old, that's reflective of things that were from a year ago, showing that inflation, even though it's not that high, is artificially high. If we use more real-time data, just like putting instant replay into football, coming to the modern age, if we use real-time data, inflation is right under 2% on the headline and just above 2% normally. So their obsession with this is not warranted. In addition to that, the Fed is worried about these tariffs. But if they would just understand that tariffs do not always get passed on to the consumer, oftentimes they are absorbed because pricing is elastic, Roger. Consumers make choices. Unless it's energy or gasoline or a specific drug, people can either cut back or make other choices to avoid that. And this is what Jerome Powell doesn't understand. Neither do the Fed. The Fed has become a bunch of lemmings. They are afraid of their own shadow because if somebody disagrees, they're ostracized. We talked about this before. In the UK, they just had a vote. 5-4, 4 against. That's real debate. That's really people opening their minds. Here, they all think the same. They're all a bunch of neo-Keynesians. And the problems that you run into is you don't have anyone with clear thought. Look, back in 2022, you had everybody begging for inflation. You had Powell, Mester, Kashkari, you had Daly, all screaming, we need more inflation. Well, they got it. They got everything they wanted because they were looking at old data, Roger. I think that the president is totally correct in asking for the Fed to cut rates. I think that Secretary Bessent and Director Pulte are 100% on target because housing is a big driver. And let me tell you something else. The job numbers, I know they came out solid, but there are some underlying weaknesses in the job picture that could really hurt us if the Fed does not act now, because it takes time for these Fed cuts to work through the economy. And if they don't act now, they're going to hurt employment and they're going to cause the job market to weaken, and that's less tax receipts and people on the unemployment line.
Unless, of course, that is their goal, because this is all politics. Look, the requirement for capital formation is consistency and certainty. Hopefully, with passage of the big, beautiful bill, tax policy will be set, and businesses and families will be able to plan accordingly. If the bill fails to pass, we will have a 68% federal tax increase across the board. Seems to me the Fed, with its too late strategy, is designed to bank on uncertainty. Banks make a ton of money selling derivatives to profit from uncertainty. The bank derivative sales essentially raise borrowing costs for private capital and to prolong high interest rates for every borrower, including the U.S. Treasury. The constant speculation here is a stall for action, if you ask me. It is essential that Jerome Powell cut the politics and cut the interest rates. As Bill Pulte said in that audio we played earlier, the last time the Fed cut rates, the interest rate was about where it is now.
That is 100% true. But they were looking at things like the unemployment rate was beginning to rise, and that's what caught their eye. Now they're obsessed with inflation, and they're obsessed with the fear of tariffs. But tariffs could actually be deflationary, and they could slow economic activity. The Fed, once again, is misguided in this, and they need to take a step back. Look, what would be the harm in saying we're 100 basis points or 1% restrictive? It takes a long time for this Fed action. What they should be doing now is saying, look, let's hedge our bets here. We will still be restrictive. We could hedge against inflation, but let's cut at least 0.5% here and kind of minimize the potential damage that they're causing. But yet they're not doing it. And it is, I don't know if just Powell, we got one more year, Powell, one more year. And then we'll get somebody in like a Kevin Warsh who will be fantastic as a Fed chair.
All right, I'm afraid we have to leave it there. I want to thank Barry Habib, economic guru extraordinaire, for telling us why President Donald Trump is absolutely right. It's time to cut the interest rate now. Whatever you do, don't go away, because we'll be right back with Alex Jones of The Alex Jones Show. And we've got a lot to talk about, including defeating the New World Order. Whatever you do, don't touch that dial.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Roger Stone Show.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back. Now I am joined by Alex Jones, who is without any question one of the most dynamic and influential commentators on alternative media today. He, of course, is the host of the Alex Jones Show, which you can see at Infowars.com, or you can see it Real Alex Jones on X, formerly known as Twitter. Alex Jones got his start in radio, initially as a commentator for KJFK FM in his hometown of Austin. Let me tell you something else about Alex Jones. He may be one of the most beloved and reviled people in the country, much like myself, but he's a fighter. He is fearless. He is indefatigable. He is courageous. He's a patriot. And above all, he is loyal. There is no more loyal person you want in the foxhole with you than Alex Jones. We have been through fire together, and I'm proud to call him my friend and delighted to have him on the Roger Stone Show today. Alex, welcome.
Roger, last time we were here, it was a super exciting, informative, and very, very popular broadcast, not just on your great WABC there, but also on Twitter. Massive views there on X, so it's great to be back with you. I know we have some really important topics to cover.
I'm going to start with just a generic question, then we'll get into the meaty stuff. You were a pioneer in alternative media back to the 1990s, and you've recently regained enormous visibility on X. Again, folks can see you at Real Alex Jones there. How has your approach to reaching audience changed in this new era of social media, and what's the most unexpected lesson you've learned from your return to X after being widely banned by the deep state?
Well, I mean, Trumpers that are targeted about the deep state and a lot about those straw men. Then they try to take you off everything so you can't respond, and they really try to steal your identity. But the biggest thing I've learned is, the corporate media was even weaker than I thought. The fact that they demonize us and attack us, most people then know, oh, they must be good guys. I better go seek them out. And so I've really, in ways, gained a much wider, more diverse audience, not just in the U.S., but around the world. in the last 9 years of just unprecedented persecution. As soon as I endorsed Trump 9.5 years ago, when you got him on the show, all hell broke loose. They thought if they could demonize me and take me down, that would then intimidate everybody else. But here we are 8-9 years later. They've got Elon Musk, a much bigger target, trying to take him down. And, of course, that's failed as well. So their lawfare and their criminal charges and their lies and their censorship have really failed. I'm still on talk radio, bigger than ever, and we're just dominating over at Real Alex Jones on X. They're still in court next week trying to take him forward still. They've been caught in that whole saga, but, that's just a website. The InfoWar belongs to the people. But, you called us the alternative media. We were that 10 years ago, but we really are the new media. We're the dominant media. Everybody is the media now. And the corporate media is the dinosaur enemy of the people joke. But talk radio was the original internet. It was the original soapbox. It was the original decentralized system where people could call in unfiltered, uncensored, all the different dynamic hosts and guests. And so really, it's been talk radio from the beginning, going back to Rush Limbaugh, that really helped launch the platforms we've got today. And we wouldn't have had a chance without it. So thank God to Roger Ailes and Rush Limbaugh for what they did 40 years ago.
Alex, you had a show the other day, one of the most shocking shows I've ever seen, and you report some incredibly shocking and true stuff. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the Secretary of Health and Human Services, revealed mass graves of small black children based on scientific experiments conducted on them by Dr. Anthony Fauci. Let's play that.
Tony Fauci made sure and none of those kids had guardians, which is illegal. And then he hid what he was doing from the boards. He took foster homes in 6 states and he turned them over to the pharmaceutical industry. He made sure that the people who were running those foster homes did not even have medical training. Most of them were immigrants who came from the Dominican Republic. They knew nothing about medicine or responsibilities, and they were sickened when they realized slowly what they were involved in doing to these children, that they were torturing these children. And there's videos of these children, an old BBC documentary that will make you cry. I promise you cannot look at these without weeping. One of these kids, a 12-year-old who's trying to protect the 8-year-old, and he has a tube in his stomach. And he's telling them, I tried to fight them, and this is what they do if you fight them. You can't fight them. You need to just take the drugs. And the kids didn't want to take them because the drugs were making them horribly sick. And Celia Farber, who's this amazing researcher who worked on this chapter for me and did a lot of the original research on it, she actually went up to Hawthorne, New York, to the Gates of Heaven Cemetery. She found the cemetery where Fauci was disposing of the corpses of these children who died in his illegal experiments. She found an open pit. It was actually covered by an astroturf carpet. She opened the astroturf carpet and she saw hundreds and hundreds of tiny little coffins stacked haphazardly upon each other, because these are children who have no parents and nobody was there to protect them. And Tony Fauci treated them as collateral damage. And, his objective was to enlarge the markets for these pharmaceutical companies who he had partnered with by allowing HIV, these toxic chemotherapy drugs, to be given to children. And then the next experiments, which are in the next chapter, which are equally horrendous, is his experiments on Africa.
Alex, what's the lowdown on Dr. Anthony Fauci? We've got about 2.5 minutes, and we'll go to break, and then we'll pick it up on the other side.
Well, I know that sounds shocking to listeners, but everything Kennedy just said is true. It's in a 2-hour BBC documentary that came out in 2004. I covered it in the mid-'90s with the very journalist that he was just talking about. She's on my show next week. You should get her on. And it was thousands of people around the country, New York, Maryland, but as far away as Texas. And Fauci fake things to ship it to Africa, and then people thought they were dying of HIV.
I think we may have lost Alex Jones. I'm fully aware of the fact that when the AIDS epidemic began, Dr. Anthony Fauci refused to approve on-label use of Bactrim. Bactrim was a simple and inexpensive drug that had been around since the 50s. It was particularly effective for the treatment of a unique type of pneumonia that those gay men who were affected with the HIV virus were particularly susceptible to. It was killing thousands of people. Anthony Fauci could have prevented those deaths, but he insisted that he wanted to develop an HIV vaccination, which would have been much, much more profitable for the drug companies that he and later he and his wife had partnered with. This is the same Anthony Fauci who would remove the larynxes of helpless dogs and then lock their heads into an enclosure filled with these sand fleas that would literally eat the flesh of these helpless animals. This man is a demon. He is evil, and he has a pardon from Joe Biden, or at least he has a pardon from Joe Biden's pardon pen, his auto pen, so that he cannot be prosecuted for these crimes against humanity. When we come back, Alex Jones can pick this up on the other side. He can tell you more about Anthony Fauci than I ever knew, but he is public enemy number one. If there's anyone who should be brought to justice, anyone who meets the definition of mass murderer, I would argue it is Dr. Anthony Fauci. We'll be right back with Alex Jones on the other side. Whatever you do, don't touch that dial.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Roger Stone Show.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And we're back with our guest, the irrepressible Alex Jones. You can find him on X under Real Alex Jones, or go to Infowars.com. He does 3 hours a day every weekday. That's why I call him indefatigable. He is the Patriot's Patriot. We're talking about Dr. Anthony Fauci. I was very encouraged when the Trump administration canceled a $700 million contract with Moderna for an mRNA bird flu vaccine. Also pleased that RFK has ended the recommendation for the COVID-19 vaccination for newborns and women who are pregnant. Yet Dr. Stella Immanuel, who I've seen on your show, Alex, who I think is great, says that the next pandemic will be the Nipah virus, or NIV, a non-segmented, single-stranded, negative-sense RNA virus belonging to the genus Henipus virus family. She says it causes acute encephalitis, respiratory disease in humans, and could be quite deadly. She recalls how they predicted the COVID-19 virus. She notes that they are now predicting this. Alex, are we on the edge of another pandemic?
Well, that's right. We've had Hotez, that's Fauci's minion and spokesman, out there saying, don't worry, a new pandemic will stop Trump. Then we had the Pfizer head of mRNA caught by the great James O'Keefe 2.5 years ago. He was still at Veritas, saying, oh, we've made a bunch of viruses for new COVID, new diseases that we're going to release for our business model. So we know they're doing this. We know Obama ordered the creation of COVID-19 at Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Not only was it made in a lab, it was moved in 2015. There was a big scandal and a bunch of other illegal gain-of-function development to Wuhan for plausible deniability. As much as I don't like the communist Chinese, this was not the communist Chinese. This was Peter Daszak. This was Anthony Fauci. HHS head. Kennedy's written the definitive book, The Real Anthony Fauci, on that. But just briefly back to what you were saying, because I'm driving in the country and there was a big wreck on the highway, so I had to go through a side road. Sorry, my phone got out earlier. Is that it was almost completely nothing but young black children taken from single black mothers. Over 95% of them were black, by Fauci. He ran the program. Tens of thousands of kids, thousands died. This was a mass grave with hundreds dead just in New York State alone. And so the level of this guy's evil is just absolutely unprecedented. He sees us all as guinea pigs. They lied and said the COVID shot would protect you. They lied and said that you couldn't spread it if you took it, even though it erases your immune system. And again, it has the HIV spike protein in it that attacks your autoimmune system and your white blood cells. So they're absolutely gearing up a bunch of new viruses. We know they're behind it. The UN said for decades they would use a novel virus or viruses they call disease X to bring in this global government. The UN wants this treaty that takes over national sovereignty. Trump has blocked that and gotten us out of the WHO, but still they've got states like Washington and New York, where you had your courts there, authorize the governor to say that during any type of medical emergency, basically, you're under martial law. So they're doing an end run because we won't ratify the treaty and doing it at the state levels. But it's not just Washington State and New York State. It's a bunch of other states have passed or are passing martial law legislation, medical martial law. They built all these emergency virus centers, outbreak centers, not just here, but all around the world under UN auspices, under UN direction. So they always said, I got documents that Lou Dobbs got in 2006 where they said, the UN said, we're going to use viruses to bring in global government. So that's how I've been saying this and hammering this for so long because this has been their plan. Of course, Bill Gates and Klaus Schwab are right at the top of this whole thing, and it's a very, very serious situation.
FBI Director Kash Patel this week says he will release documents showing where the FBI sources were on the ground during January 6th. The mainstream media has tried endlessly to tie both you and I to the illegal activities of January 6th, even though Reuters reported in April of that year that the FBI had concluded that neither one of us was involved in any illegal activity involving so-called paramilitary organizations. What do you expect these forthcoming January 6th document releases to show, Alex?
Well, Roger, I was there on January 6th. You wisely were there for speeches, but decided not to, actually even, go to the Capitol. We were there peaceful. We had a stage by the Supreme Court rented. We said peacefully go there. And now we know they had Antifa, they had other leftist groups, and they had FBI and other agency groups dressed up as Trump supporters breaking into the Capitol. They had them also inside the Capitol helping them get in. Pelosi had a camera crew there with her daughter. When Trump wanted 10,000 National Guard in the weeks before, Pelosi and the mayor of D.C. blocked it, along with Milley, the treasonous general. And so this whole thing was a giant setup. Then they had the January 6th fake committee that was fraudulent and wasn't a real act of Congress. The Congress didn't vote for it. The Democrats just created it and put puppet Democrats on it like Liz Cheney. And then they used that to scoop up all the real evidence of January 6th. Then they destroyed all the evidence. They falsified evidence. So they had to be pardoned for what they did. They then said Jan 6 was bigger than Pearl Harbor and 9/11, even though 4 U.S. citizens died, including Ashley Babbitt, executed. And so they used that to try to set up their domestic federal police force and come after the Patriots. But now the public has seen through it. It's blown in their face. So the word is it's just going to be a bunch of information from the FBI perspective that we already know, but it'll be certified and undeniable. And that's why they had to have those pardons. That's why they destroyed your testimony and my testimony and 90+% of the testimony before Congress is because we let them have it and expose what frauds they were to their face. I told them, I said, you are criminals. This is not a real committee. You've already falsified evidence. They've already been caught doing that, changing emails, changing the wording on them like he did to Trump several times. And it was just disgusting. Trump that day said peacefully go to the Capitol. And then during the staged attack, he went on Twitter and said, do not go in, get out. And then they banned him so that people couldn't see him say that, and so they could lie and say that he said attack the Capitol. So despite all their lies, the truth has now come out, thank God.
All right, we'll be right back with more of Alex Jones. When we come back, I'm going to ask him whether we can avert World War III. We see Lindsey Graham presuming to speak for the United States, trying to foment world war by visiting Ukraine. I guess he's not too busy doing anything in Congress because Congress does nothing. We'll be back with Alex Jones to break it all down. Please, whatever you do, don't touch that dial. You'll be right back in The Roger Stone Show.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. Roger Stone Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And we're back with Alex Jones. He's, of course, the host of the Alex Jones Show, which you can find at Real Alex Jones on X or by going to Infowars.com. Alex, the Bohemian Grove is a secret conclave of globalist elites that takes place once a year in the woods in Northern California. It is an all-male gathering in which those participants dress in costumes, often dress as women, engage in skits, and reportedly worship a giant statue of an owl that represents Moloch. Here's what President Richard Nixon had to say about the Bohemian Grove.
The Bohemian Grove that I attend from time to time, the Easterners and the others that come there, but it is the most damn thing you will ever imagine. A San Francisco crowd that goes in there. It's just terrible.
Alex, you crashed the Bohemian Grove. This is so cool, I can't stand it. Tell us about that.
Absolutely. Back in 1999, I was approached by International British Television, and they said, because of liability issues, we're scared to sneak in there, but we know some insiders that work there. We know some of the secret passcodes, and we want you to go in and film this ritual in front of this giant 45-foot stone owl that nobody's ever been able to get, where they reportedly do a mock human sacrifice of a child in all these Druidic robes, and amongst the other weirdness. So I was able to sneak in with a small hidden camera. I was able to get the footage. I was able to get out. Others have tried and been caught and been arrested. And I was only inside for 4 hours. You know, they have guests that come and a lot of prominent people. So I'm not saying everybody that goes is bad. But as Nixon said, and as has come out, it is basically Skull and Bones for people out of college, but much bigger. And it traces itself backward in their own literature that's been leaked out to the German Illuminati, the Bavarian Illuminati. And it's extremely occultic. And it's also extremely homosexual. And that's really the old Republican Party that if you wanted to be in it, you had to go. And as you know, Nixon, talked about that, your old boss, your old friend. And he obviously wasn't part of it, but that's what goes on there. And that just shows you that there's all these different bizarre secret societies, but it's definitely one of the most powerful. We had presidents back at the turn of the 19th century, Republican presidents that really started, going there. Mark Twain founded it. And then it was a big party atmosphere where they would bring up a bunch of prostitutes. And then over time, by about 1900, they kicked the prostitutes out, and it became let's just say what it is, an occultic homosexual cult.
Former President Herbert Hoover had a cabin every year. This is where giant decisions were made. Both Ronald Reagan and Richard Nixon were summoned by the captains who controlled money at that time in American politics. In the 1968 Republican presidential nomination was sorted out. Reagan was told that he would have to wait, and that Nixon got the go-ahead. They were a financial fact of life. Alex, I've noticed that you look terrific. We haven't seen each other in person in a while, but you've lost a lot of weight. You look hale and healthy. You've clearly reclaimed your body and your health. What was the aha moment, and how important is a healthy body in this fight against the globalists?
Well, I was inspired by Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Maha, because I know everything they're saying is true, to start to exercise more, to eat healthy, and basically stop drinking. And just start caring about myself more, because I've got all these enemies that want to take me down. And so I really realized I was my own worst enemy. At dinner about 11 months ago, Joe Rogan, who I've known for 25 years, good friend, he said, "Look, Alex, you're a good-looking guy, but you're a big fat ass." And he said, "I challenge you to work out." And his workout buddy, Sean Johnson, former Navy SEAL, said, "Listen, I'll start training you 7 days a week when I'm in town." And I said, "Fine, I take the challenge." And I've lost 70 pounds, and totally natural with supplements and a lot of exercise, intermittent fasting, and so it's been amazing.
Yeah, you look great, and congratulations to you. I agree. Fit mind, fit body. You have to be in top shape to fight the globalists. Joe Biden said recently that he would beat the hell out of CNN's Jake Tapper when he was asked about the news reporting on his mental incompetence. This, by the way, fits a long trend. Joe Biden has threatened to beat up every political opponent he's had. When he threatened during a debate to Trump to fight John Burris, who was a trucking executive who challenged him in a U.S. Senate race. He threatened several times to take Donald Trump out behind the venue where he was speaking. First of all, the guy looks like he weighs 155 pounds, and a stiff wind would knock him over. He wasn't in condition to fight anybody. But this constant threat of violence by Joe Biden, I think, is part and parcel of his precipitous mental decline, which we could all see with our own eyes. But the media kept saying, don't believe what you see. Don't believe the way he reads the stage directions. Don't believe the way he can't finish a full sentence. He just trails off. Don't pay attention to the fact that he's constantly falling down and he's talking to people who don't exist or can't figure out which way to exit the stage. Is this the greatest single scandal in American political history?
Well, it is. Look, you and I got double banned. People can look it up, 2019, for saying, as he was running against Trump, we said, look, the guy's a puppet. You said it'd be Klain running it. You said it'd be an auto pin. You literally broke all that. But everybody now is like, oh, we knew he was in decline 2 years ago. He clearly had a stroke in 2019. He went from being bad to really bad. It was overnight. I said it. You said it. And then they had all these headlines that not only are Roger Stone and Alex Jones banned on Facebook and YouTube, but we're doubly banned. No one is allowed to say anything nice about us. And then Facebook and its rules even said, but you're allowed to call for violence against these 12 people. And Roger Stone and I were amongst it. That was a test. And so that ties back into all his calls for violence as well. And Comey's 86-47. They're putting contracts out publicly against the president. You have all these Democrats on The View saying Trump's killing people with no evidence, so we need to, be ready to fight and die. They really want to get riots going this summer, but people are really waking up to them. And so they're extremely, extremely desperate and extremely dangerous right now. But, yeah, I mean, he can't even navigate stairs for 5-6 years. So the guy's an absolute joke. They got to hop him up reportedly on amphetamines, even get him to be able to talk, and he's just a complete joke. But he's emblematic of the collapsing globalist leftist Democrat Party that if we just continue to deliver as Trump's doing, we all keep backing Make America Great Again. I don't see how the Democratic Party even continues on.
Yeah, it is amazing that Jake Tapper, talk about a shady character, he dressed Lara Trump down when she suggested in an interview that Joe might be slipping cognitively. He annihilated her. Now he's out there trying to cash in on the fact that he didn't report it then, but he's reporting it now. Dude, you knew then. You all knew then. I watched that Washington, the White House Correspondents' Dinner, where they gave an award to one reporter, Alex Thomas. He finally reported that Joe was non-compos mentis. These are the same people who gave an award to CNN for being outside my home when I was arrested in 2019, as if that wasn't the result of a tip from the White House, from the Mueller investigators. I was arrested at 6:06. At 6:11, my lawyer gets a text message that includes the sealed indictment that would not be unsealed by a federal magistrate till 11 o'clock that morning. And when you look in the metadata tags, you find the initials of the man who wrote it, and therefore the man who leaked it, Andrew Weissman, the arch villain who was really running the Mueller operation. So CNN, I don't get my news from CNN for the same reason I don't drink out of the toilet. I mean, it's a cesspool of disinformation. But watching Jake Tapper maneuver now as if he didn't know, he knew, and now he's trying to cash in on it, among the absolute worst. Alex, the Chinese defense ministers complained that President Trump's moving towards a golden dome. We used to call this the Strategic Defense Initiative. Leftists mocked us by calling it Star Wars under Ronald Reagan. It obviously had huge technological advances since then. They say that we're militarizing outer space and making it a battlefield. I think President Trump's move is pretty smart. We got about a minute and a half before we break, and then we'll be back. Alex, what do you say?
Absolutely. That will shut down China's intercontinental ballistic missiles that the Clintons basically gave them the technology for treasonously in the mid-1990s. We already have a lot of these systems there. Trump's just beefing it up. Trump would be derelict in his duty to defend America if he did not put up the Golden Dome. Most of it's already up there. It's just highly classified. Trump is just upgrading it and letting the Chinese and the Russians know that we have total superiority, not just with our strategic defense initiative, but also with these other super weapons that I know from physicists and others working on it, make nuclear weapons look like pop guns. So the United States is dominant. We are the world reserve currency, and we have all the cards. The globalists were handing them away at the last minute, but Trump jerked victory out of the jaws of defeat with the American people, and it's ours to lose now. We got to back Trump 100%.
Amen and amen. If you're just tuning in, we're talking to Alex Jones. You can find him on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Real Alex Jones, or you can find his daily show 5 days a week, plus his emergency broadcasts on the weekend. You can find those at Infowars.com. Don't go away. When we come back, I want to ask Alex Jones about the brutal murder of one of his employees, an old colleague of mine, Jamie White, who was brutally murdered. We now have some answers about that, but I also want to ask him whether he sees victory on the horizon. We'll be right back. Don't touch that dial.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Roger Stone Show.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And we're back with Alex Jones, who is one of the most influential voices in the new media because he has this tremendous tendency to report the truth. It's amazing how many things that Alex Jones predicted that have come true. You can buy yourself an Alex Jones is Right t-shirt. I have one. Alex, a sad item, Jamie White, a talented reporter that I worked with when I hosted the War Room with my colleague Owen Schroyer there at Infowars.com, probably the happiest time in my life, was tragically shot and killed outside of his office apartment in March. Now it's reported that 4 suspects have been arrested, and at least one of those suspects acted with an anti-white racial animus. This evil trend, I think, kicked into high gear by Barack Obama over 10 years ago. How has Jamie's death affected you personally? And how are you addressing this terrific gap that is caused by his loss?
Well, that's right. Jamie was hands down our best writer. Everybody said that. And he was there 9 years. You worked with him. And he was executed a few miles from our house when they came to rob his car, basically carjacking. And I said it's probably our Soros DA. The crime's doubled since he got in 5 years ago. They defunded the police by at least 30%. He lets people out with no bond and shoot people. So it's just made crime explode. And I said he was probably, killed by a gang or something. And then it was the 3 Hispanics. 2 of them are juveniles from other names. And then 1 Hispanic and 1 black male, 17, who, according to the police affidavit, he's been charged with capital murder. He pulled the trigger, shot Jamie in the throat, and killed him in 1 shot to the carotid artery. And he cut a rap song, we now know, according to ABC News locally, where he said, he bragged about how he killed that piece of white garbage. And so it's just really, really sad and just a horrible situation. But at least the Austin Police Department was very vigilant and really worked on it hard. And now they've got all 4 of them charged with capital murder.
It is a great, great tragedy. I saw in a recent discussion you touched on the AI wars and infinite energy. Given your longstanding focus on both of these global conspiracies, what's the most alarming or exciting development you see in the intersection of AI technology and global power structures? And how are you preparing your audience for what comes next?
Well, it's all alarming. The private AI, the government AI. There's a giant AI race. They're talking about trying to give AI 100 times more power than it's got. The same left that says we shouldn't have food or cars because it's bad for the earth. Energy's bad for us, but AI should have unlimited energy. We're basically worshiping at the feet of this thing, feeding everything into it. And it's to me, I'm not anti-technology, but the way this is all being deployed, all the major AI systems, including Grok, are very leftist. It's just full of disinformation, and I don't think humanity should be handing all our power over to AI, and it's already causing a lot of societal problems. And so I think it's probably, other than nuclear war, the biggest challenge facing humanity right now. But overall, I think the public's becoming aware of it. Congress is becoming aware of it, and so it's obviously something we've got to watch and pay a lot of attention to. Obviously, AI has a lot of great uses, and a lot of independent groups have been innovating it. We've been using it a lot. The biggest threat of AI is what Obama wanted to do. And when I say Obama, I mean the Biden administration. The Biden administration wanted a monopoly on AI. It doesn't want the general public to really have access to use it. So the answer to AI is lots of different AIs and lots of different diversity in it. But if you go to any of the major AIs, including Grok, which we have great hopes for, but Gemini, you name it, it won't. If you ask it to show you founding fathers, it shows you people that aren't white. And again, nothing against people that aren't white. It's just all about feeding it disinfo. AI is being trained by these big global corporations to be oppressive and to not empower humanity. And so that's a major problem. Since you mentioned it earlier, I'd also like to talk some about the huge developments on the Ukraine-Russia war front.
Yes, let's do that.
General Kellogg, Trump's main envoy, came out yesterday and said, look, NATO did start this war. Russia is reasonable to not want NATO expansion up to its borders. That was one of the main conditions for peace. And that we're looking to have a deal where Ukraine will not join NATO. So that is a very, very exciting thing. When Trump said, why is Putin bombing Ukraine? Ukraine has doubled their bombings inside Russia in the last month, but our media is not covering that. So Zelensky and elements of NATO want to keep this war going, but Trump's doing a great job trying to get a real peace deal, just like he's doing between Israel and Iran. So just another great thing that President Trump and his different anti-war envoys are doing.
Look, when we signed the Budapest Memorandum after the Russians agreed to the unification of East and West Germany, we agreed in writing not to push Ukraine into NATO, which means really not to mount NATO missiles funded and supplied by the United States on the ground in Ukraine pointed at Russia. We reaffirmed that in the Minsk Accords. We are in active violation of both of those signed agreements. And Putin, I think, and I'm not an apologist or a lover of Putin. My family was mowed down by Russians' tanks in Budapest in 1956. Good God. He's just as evil as, Zelensky. They're both dictators, brutal dictators.
Roger, but you're right. But the issue is, go online on X, just type in NATO expansion map, and it shows it since 1991 going right to Russia's borders, putting missiles on our borders. We would never put up with this, and you've got elements of NATO now authorizing long-range missiles to hit anywhere inside Russia directed by NATO and the U.S. That is a serious escalation in the war. Kellogg admitted today that the U.S. is basically at war with Russia. But absolutely, we should not be the aggressor. We should not be starting this. Secretary of Defense Hank said this right. China is getting ready to go into Taiwan. That is the main threat right now. We've got to totally pivot to deal with China. They are the main threat. Russia is not expansionist. Europe has nuclear weapons. Russia is not going into more countries if we simply do not bring some of those other countries like Ukraine into NATO. That's why Putin said he invaded. Our media just ignored that. But now Kellogg, Trump's head envoy, has put that squarely on the table. So I'm very optimistic we can get world peace. Trump's won the trade war already. The corporate media keeps trying to lie about that. I'm surprised how good Trump's doing, how fast he's doing. But in the info war, we're still winning, but not as much as we are in the war of real reality and business and life and security. 96% shutdown of the border, better than Trump did in his first term. He got 94%. I mean, Trump gets A+ on action, but when it comes to the public understanding just how good the job he's doing, he gets about a C-. But that's really our fault. We all have to get the word out. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, sure, Trump has the highest approval rating ever he's had. Americans for the first time have optimism and believe the president of any president in modern history is doing a good job. So even the skewed polls show we're winning the info war, but not as much as we should be. I mean, Trump is running circles around the globalists and the feckless, out-of-control Democratic Party that thinks that AOC should be the face of the future. They are a joke. So we have to continue to press the attack in the info war and just continue to get the word out.
All right. I want to thank our guest, Alex Jones. I have no problem with Lindsey Graham going to Ukraine. My problem with his coming back. Thanks for joining us today on The Roger Stone Show.
Thanks for listening to The Roger Stone Show. You can hear The Roger Stone Show Sunday afternoons at 3. If you like the podcast, Share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?
Hello, folks. Larry Kudlow here. Pay attention, because China is leading the largest anti-American alliance since World War II. One that's already dumped U.S. bonds, grabbed 43 million acres of our farmland, and is plotting to dethrone the dollar. That's why IRA and 401k savers are protecting their savings with gold. Please go to freegoldguide.com/Kudlow or just call 800-621-3908 for your free gold guide on how to protect your wealth with gold 100% tax-free.